Hey everybody, Dan from Sci-Fi Models and Stuff here, and I've just finished up this amazing King Kong bust from Blackheart Studios. Today I'm going to take you through the painting process from start to finish, and I'm pretty excited to show you some of the new techniques that I learned on this build. When I first got this kit a few weeks ago, I honestly thought that it was going to take me a few months to paint something this big. But really, once I got started, I just couldn't put it down, and I finished it over a long weekend. Now the format of this video is going to be a little bit different from some that I've done in the past. I'm still trying to experiment with my video style, so if this is something you like, leave me a comment. If it's something you dislike, leave me a comment too so I know. Make sure you check out blackheartmodels.com so you can see all the amazing model kits and busts and figures that they make. I'm not paid or sponsored by Blackheart Models in any way, but if anybody from Blackheart is listening and watching, I am available. As always, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and you can also check us out on Instagram at Sci-Fi Models and Stuff. Alright, thanks for watching. The first step in every resin project is to clean up any seams, mold lines, or defects from the casting process. Now this kit is really well cast, and really the only issue is a large seam that runs through the entire piece. Here I am carefully sanding down seams where I can and using a series of small files to match some of the details that are sculpted into the hair. Now remember, it's important not to accidentally remove any sculpted details while you're doing this. I also use some filler putty on the sides when necessary. Okay, we've cleaned up the sculpt, got it primed in black, and we're ready to start the eyes. I paint the eyes with a mixture of white and a sand color, and then place a dot in the center where the pupil will be. Next, I take an ultrafine airbrush and airbrush a small black circle throughout the center of the eye. This is going to serve as the outline of the iris. For the iris itself, I'm using a method that I haven't tried before. Basically, you take a small amount of brown, gold, and various shades of yellow and slowly blend in an X shape over the iris. You let that dry, and then you add layer upon layer, blending it each time to get a natural look of the iris. This whole process takes probably about an hour or so, and the important thing is to let each layer dry. Once I'm satisfied, I move on and do the same to the other eye. Lastly, I drop a circle of black ink in the middle to act as the pupil. Now, this is the most crucial step of the eye and can be very difficult, so take your time. I use an ink because it's very viscous and it flows really nicely. I start with a small circle and slowly blend it out to make it wider until it's as big as I would like. Once you're happy with that, I take a small toothpick and gently scratch a star shape into the eye. That looks more natural, and if you look at reference images, looks closer to what an actual pupil looks like. Finally, when that's dried and I'm satisfied, I coat it with a 2-part clear epoxy. This self-levels out really nicely and really brings the eye to life. Now that the eyes are done, we're going to move on to the next portion, which is the mouth. This is probably the most difficult part of the build. First, I need to build up the color from black, so I lay down a base of a light flesh color. After that, I start layering on some reds, some pinks, and finally I layer some purple around the dark edges of the mouth, around the tongue, around the teeth, and the edges of the gums. Now what I like to do with the mouth is start at the darkest color, which is normally a purpley red brown mix, and slowly build your colors up back towards pink and red. Now sometimes you go too light with the colors and you have to darken it back down. The idea is though, if you keep layering your paint colors, you'll get a more natural look. Sometimes I go in with a Q-tip to blend the colors around, and that helps a lot too. Once I get the mouth the way I want, the next step is to paint the teeth, and to do this I mask them off with Silly Putty. This is a very time-consuming process, and you really want to be as careful as you can when masking these off. Remember, any areas you overspray or get paint that you don't want, you're going to have to go back and fix. So try to do this once. Now that that's done, I'm spraying the teeth with that same color we use for the eyes, a mix of a sand and a white. Gives you a little bit of an off-white color. Later we'll add some washes and more definition to this. The mask has been removed. There's still some more work I need to do, so I mix up some oils on a palette, namely white, red, and brown, and I get to work blending in more colors around the tongue and the inside of the cheeks. This really adds a level of realism too, because the oils are transparent and you can see all the color underneath. I blend that in with a Q-tip and wash away somewhere I don't need it. For the teeth, I mix up a mixture of yellow, brown, and green, and I apply that pretty evenly. In a little bit, we'll go ahead and blend that and wipe some off. It'll stay in the cracks and give us a good realistic look. Make sure to blend it before you wipe it off, because that's going to help it look more realistic as well. The mouth is done for now, but we'll come back later. Next, we're going to work on the chest, and to do that, I start modeling a dark gray color over the black. You just use kind of random streaks with the airbrush, and what we're doing is adding texture and building up the color from the black. Next I go over with a brownish color, keeping these paints very transparent and slowly building up the opacity of this. I also go in with some greens and light blues before finally shading this a little more uniform with a gray. To start with, I use a light flesh color before slowly transitioning to tanner flesh. Finally, I airbrush a little bit of pink in there, which helps, and then I use that same mixture of oil paints we used on the mouth to add some character. This mixture is slowly blended in with the surrounding fur to make it look more natural. I go back to the chest, after I've decided I don't like it, and add a little bit of a lighter gray. We're still doing that same modeling we used, and we're kind of avoiding the darker areas. Finally, I use an ultra-thin coat of gray to cover it and make it more uniform. This is really starting to give me the effect I want. I finally go through with a transparent blue and hit some of the cracks in the shadow areas. I mask off the teeth and the eyes, and I begin to do the same technique on the muzzle and the top of the head. Again, keeping everything random to get that good undercoat. Once I have a good base, I start working on the scar on his head as well, using the same method we did before. The next step is to make the hair details pop, so I mix up a dark gray color and dry brush it over the various raised details. This is a time-consuming process, but it is very helpful and looks very nice. Now that the main body's painted, I mix up another 2-part epoxy resin and I go to work on the mouth. I apply this pretty evenly so the mouth gets a nice wet look. The last thing we have to paint on Kong is the large map of Skull Island on his back. I start off by masking it off with silly putty around the edges, and then building up the colors. We want a parchment look, so I start with a dark brown and slowly work my way up to a tan color. This is very difficult painting over the black, so it takes 2 or 3 different coats. When that's done, I apply a gloss coat to get ready for some washes. After the clear coat is dried, I mix up a black oil wash and apply that pretty uniformly to get into all the nooks and crannies on the island shapes. I start to blend up the edges, but I kind of leave it looking rough as well. Once I'm satisfied with that, I do the same with a brown wash, and that really helps to bring out additional colors. Afterwards, I fill in the areas around the islands with masking fluid. This particular product is Vallejo masking fluid, which I'm not really fond of, but for this purpose it seemed to work okay. This is a very time-consuming process, and it's really not a lot of fun watching this dry. This tends to shrink a little bit too, so it requires constant adjustment while it's drying. Once that dries, I airbrush a layer of khaki green over the top of the island. I keep this very thin so I can still see the wash underneath. And it gives a pretty convincing effect of landmass. Okay, so over the last few days I've been working pretty much non-stop on our Andero / Naomi Watts figure for King Kong. Now, I recorded about 55 minutes of actual footage of me working and explaining and, showing you how to go about painting a figure like this, only for ultimately my decision to strip the paint. So I soaked it in some paint thinner, I removed all the paint, and we're gonna start again. So just, let that be a reminder that pretty much anything you do, if you make a mistake, you can start over. So we are gonna be showing you a new method that I haven't tried before. We're gonna give a shot. For the figure, I start with a gray primer base, and I evenly airbrush a layer of flesh tones over the top. After that's dried, I use a slightly darker tone and start to airbrush some of the shadows. Next is kind of the interesting part. I start with a red oil paint. I dab that around and blend that into the flesh colors. That leaves a pretty convincing effect and looks like real skin, but after that I do the same with the yellow. After that's blended in, we'll do the final color, which is blue. And the good thing about using this technique is that you can really dial in the colors that you use. Things are very easily adjusted. Next, I paint in the eyes with an off-white color. And then I go over them with a flesh-colored oil. While we're waiting on that, I paint the lips with a dull pink color. And I put a drop of dark red in the mouth. Next, I use a dark flesh-colored oil paint to do some of the outlines around the eyes. Then I'm ready to start working on the pupils. Just like Kong, I place a small dot where I want the eye to go, and then slowly work that out into an iris shape. Lastly, I put a dot of pure black in the middle, and a tiny white catchlight. Do a little more work with that flesh-colored oil to blend those out. And finally I work on the eyebrows with a little bit of oil paint and her face is done. Unfortunately, I realized when I was editing this video that a lot of the footage painting this Andero figure was actually lost. Now, I'm not sure if I deleted it or if I never turned the camera on or exactly what happened, but I'm pretty disappointed because all I can show you is how I painted her face. So, unfortunately, I can't show you. But with that, our model is completed and here's the final results.